Look, us
Hello.
having some of this nonsense.
I know. Yeah. You look very well. You look younger and very
Well, I'm not
healthy.
getting around. I'm in one place for 2 months.
I
And
know. It's amazing. Where are you?
I'm in Dehradun. I got back
Oh,
just in time. So I'm
you.
locked down in my childhood home. Yeah.
How do you see us moving forward after this pandemic? You know, there's clearly a fork in the road. And what do you see in that fork? And what are you trying to say to people about the way forward?
So the pandemic the whole world is living through is a pandemic of globalization in many ways. First, it's a pandemic because these new infectious diseases, 300 of them, from the SARS to the Ebolas to the Nile viruses to the Nipah viruses and the Zikas, all these new names that humanity has never had before, are a result of invasions into forests by an economic model of globalization. It is a spillover effect because globalization basically means limitless greed, limitless appetite, spreading in every nook and corner of the planet, invading into forest, forcing diseases and viruses to move from animals where they are not infectious diseases to humans where they do become infectious diseases. And whether it's the current one or the SARS or Nipah or Ebola or MERS or Zika, these new diseases did not exist before globalization. It's the last 30 years. Second, because globalization means everything is zipping around, if you look at how did it spread because of globalization. And in India, it was being called the disease of the rich because it was people who had been abroad who were bringing it home. And third, it is a disease of globalization because it's only 0.5 to 5% people, or to 1% people who face a mortality if you're infected, because infections come and go, viruses come and go, bacteria come and go. What this does is, because of the vulnerability, because of globalization, and as you know, Helena, this is what I've been doing since 87, looking at GATT, looking at WTO, what they were doing to our seed, what they were doing to our food. And the globalized food economy is not a food economy. It's a disease economy. It's a disease creating economy. And so it has spread chronic diseases, which increase the mortality because of coronavirus. And if one does a slightly honest deepening of who's actually dying in New York, it's the poor Black Americans. Who's dying in New Orleans? People in the Cancer Alley. Who's dying in Bhopal? People affected by the Bhopal disaster of 1984. So no matter, and in India, it's the diabetics, it's the heart patients. So it's the complications that are being created because of a prior morbidity condition, as they call it. And then, of course, look at the fact that even though we have democracies, the lockdown was one globalized recipe imposed all over the world, no matter what the conditions of the world. And I find that a bit strange.
I think a lot of people are finding it strange. And you and I have been studying globalization as part of a group, the International Forum on Globalization for years. And we've seen that not only does globalization destroy the food supply and our health, but it has had these other multiple effects on so-called democracy. So there again, what we're witnessing is that it's become a nice word, but very rarely a reality. So I think we'd love to hear from you about the impact of these last 30 years in which most people recognize that most of the crises we're facing, from climate change to pandemics to a loss of democracy, have dramatically increased in the last 30 years. So what is it that's happened in these 30 years? What has been this force that has created so many problems?
Well, in a way, these 30 years of globalization were bringing us back to the days of the robber barons. You know, if you look at the 30s, there were a handful of people who controlled banking, oil, then they moved with Hitler, IG Farben Standard Oil, the entire toxic chemical industry to kill people. All of that together, then it created the Depression and it created the Dust Bowl, which is why we got the New Deal. In order to regenerate the earth, give work to people, and address both the Dust Bowl and the Depression together. I've done a new book and it's available in Australia from Spin-off Express. It's called Oneness versus the 1%. And it's on the fact that I witnessed in the climate summit at Paris, Bill Gates strutting around with the heads of state. And of course, they're all the proofs now. Bill Gates is on the phone telling the heads of state to exactly do the same thing, same lockdown, same way. He's daily talking and giving instructions. But I sensed this in 2015. And my son and I started to research on how wealth had changed, how wealth movement had changed. 2 years, 3 years, a little later, Bayer was bought up by Monsanto. I wanted to figure that out. And what has happened in these 30 years is, first, all the regulations that kept inequality within decent human limits, all the regulations that prevented greed from running mad and running insane, those regulations have been dismantled. And, you know, globalization is nothing but deregulated commerce. So,
and I think it's also really important that we point out that it's been a deregulation of global monopolies, of global giants that were already too big after the Second World War, but then progressively these giants have been deregulated while everybody else has been regulated. You know, all place-based businesses regulated.
More than that, what's happened basically is not only have small businesses been regulated, but they've been criminalized. But, you know, even the big giants now, the corporations, are owned by these billionaires. So one of the new things that have happened is new asset investment funds. So the BlackRocks and the Vanguard. So when I was trying to understand how did Bayer bought by Monsanto, and my son did this amazing research, which could not be done today because they've hidden all this data and made it totally secret, that the top shares in every big company, it could be Coca-Cola, it could be McDonald's, it could be Bayer, it could be Monsanto, take any company, the top shares are owned by the investment funds, the asset management funds, who run the money of the billionaires, who are now becoming trillionaires. So in this period of the bailout of Corona, BlackRock, which was 6.7 trillion, jumped in 1 month on people's relief money. BlackRock became $23 trillion.
I didn't know that.
In this period, while lockdown meant small businesses couldn't work, you couldn't go to your neighborhood store. Amazon monopolized business through e-commerce. And Jeff Bezos personally became richer in this 1 month by $24 billion. And he is looking at 4 years, 5 years from now, being a trillionaire, the first trillionaire of the world. So not only was it deregulation of commerce, it was creating new, totally unaccountable wealth, accountable to no democracy, no country, no citizen, but the power to criminalize. And this criminalization I've had to deal with, because when they wanted to dump the GMO soya on India, they made local oils illegal because they can't. You see, it's not that they are not working on a new economy. And part of the lockdown is to criminalize the existing economy because they don't have the capacity to offer and say, here's what I bring, here's what you have, you choose. That is how economies evolve. That is how technologies evolve. But this new dictatorship of the robber barons now in techno clothes are basically saying, let's use the knockdown to impose, and let's make deals with the governments. And of course, governments love this because not only is this destruction of the local, destroying livelihoods. It is centralizing power.
Absolutely.
And it is creating a whole new economy of the surveillance corporate state, yeah, where the state facilitates the destruction of the economies of their people. And in India, I say we've gone through 3 epic pandemics in this period. The corona, which actually is very mild in terms of losses of life. We've lost more people to hunger. Just in the last few days, we've lost 200 people trying to walk back from the cities, crushed to death on highways. Half of India, you see, in the last 30 years, we were told agriculture must globalize us. And this has been my work. This is why I created Navdanya. So they flushed farmers out of the villages, threw them into precarious work in the cities. And the lockdown meant everything shut down. And here was half of India trying to get back home. And they're criminalized for trying to get back home, even though there's no food in the city, there's no work in the city, there's no care in the city. And they're dying on the roads. They're dying on highways, they're dying of hunger. So we are seeing, in a way, the lockdown try and achieve the next level of globalization if it's left to the billionaires and the big corporations and the governments they control. We lost in this period of 30 years of globalization, we lost welfare governments.
And we lost, we've lost essentially any semblance of democracy, really, when these global corporations have been able to sue governments if they do anything to inhibit their profit-making potential. So I think we need still, we've been trying for years, haven't we, to raise awareness about globalization. This new level of globalization is partly due to the fact that many people have not been skeptical about the role of these technologies. They have thought of the internet as a generally benevolent force. They have been very uncritical of technology. They haven't seen that in the hands of these centralized monopolistic giants, it is a complete tool of surveillance and control. So do you think now that we can see a fork in the road where more people are beginning to recognize the monopolistic powers of Google and Amazon? And are they beginning to become both skeptical of that and also developing out of this pandemic an appetite and a clarity about the need to support local communities, local businesses, local economies? Do you see that happening? I think, I'm certainly seeing it in many countries. Are you seeing that in India?
So first of all, the lockdown was deglobalization, and it was implemented by the globalizers to get to the next level of their globalization, but it was a deglobalization. All supply chains crashed.
Yeah.
And because over these 30 years, I've been building local initiatives of seed saving, organic farming, I would get calls from our farmers to say, Didi, thank you for putting us on this path, because we have food. Today we have sovereignty. Today we are not losing our food and livelihoods. But more than that, even in the cities, I get letters from all over the world. People are waking up to the power of unelected corporations deciding our future and our fate, basically telling us how to think, how to be, and who we are. And governments just falling all over, because I feel not only in these 30 years did globalization erode democracy, but we have witnessed how in every government, advisors were planted for neoliberal globalization. Advisors were planted on tech this and tech that. So in 2016, Bill Gates worked with our government to make cash illegal. It was called digitalization, and I've written about it in my book. I wrote then in my newspaper column, this is digital dictatorship. If you have currencies, let 10, 20 choices flow. Let people choose. Do they want to write a check? Do they want to exchange cash? And do they want digital? But let it be a choice. Pluralism and diversity is the test of democracy. The minute there is uniformity, there is dictatorship. If it's uniformity of, you know,
and also, I think it's really important there that we point out that diversity is an absolute principle and necessity of life, as you have always said, is an absolute fact and necessity of life. And what has been done is to systematically threaten and destroy life by destroying diversity. And of course, we're also looking at the link between that biological diversity and cultural diversity, and in genuine individualism. The individual turns into a frightened, fearful being trying to adapt to this imposed consumer monoculture. And so this psychological sort of terrorism on children to conform to images of a commercial consumer monoculture is another disastrous effect that, again, I just praying that people wake up to this more holistic, systemic understanding of the two paths before us. You know, the one is literally deadly. It is systematically destroying diversity and thereby destroying life. The other one is towards life, towards the earth, towards the genuine humanity that we're all capable of, that we all long to experience again. We long to feel that sense of connection to community, to others, and to the earth, to the plants, to the animals. And we can see that all over the world, can't we, Vandana? I mean, I'm also getting letters from all over the world where people are, you know, there's a thriving, joyful movement, you know, what we call the economics of happiness, being born as people reconnect at that human scale, direct experiential level. So I'd love you to say more. You know, you've been one of the people to very few people in the world who've been understanding that the monoculture is deadly at both at a biological, ecological level, and in terms of the human spirit, the human soul, human identity.
Yeah, that's why I wrote, you know, Monocultures of the Mind, because I could see, I said, here's a rich forest and they don't see the forest. They want to bring a eucalyptus from Australia to replace our tropical rainforest. They want to have our oak forests cut down, which protect the water. And that's the beginning of my ecological journey, when the women of the mountains from my region came out and said, we are going to hug the trees. We won't let you cut them. And I became an ecologist because I saw a forest go and I saw a stream disappear. Because the monoculture of the mind is a war against the earth. And having gone deeper into it, I said, where did it start? Well, here you have colonialism to say all of the world for whites and Christians, and everyone else is a barbarian that you have a right to exterminate. Then in Hitler's Germany, he just declares a superior race and declares everyone as expendable. And then they build concentration camps and they make chemicals to kill people in concentration camps. And then they take those chemicals and make them agri-chemicals to then continue killing life. And we have lost 80% insects. We've lost 93% biodiversity. We have lost amazing farming cultures. And, you know, I say, if for the last 20, 25 years, my best friend was Monsanto, my best friend now is the heir to Monsanto, Bill Gates.
Yeah,
you know,
the heir to
everything
Monsanto.
wrong that the corporations were doing, he's doing it faster, more globally, and he's treating elected heads of state as his errand boys. And I think they should be ashamed.
Yeah.
They should be ashamed. They're just running errands from him.
Well, I think, so for me, you know, I think one of the most important things that we're hoping from this World Localization Day is that we will help all those people who at the ground level, at the level of touching the earth, of caring for each other, at the level of, in every single country, everywhere you look, there is that alternative path that I see as sort of coming home, what Joanna Macy has also called the great turning. It's this basic U-turn back home to earth. And we must try to help these voices to gather into a force for their own well-being, for the earth, and fundamentally for themselves. So there is this path of well-being, of human well-being, human health, human happiness, that is completely, absolutely, necessarily the same as healing the soil, as healing the earth. And it's so wonderful, you know, to hear more and more science talking about the biome of the gut and the biome of the soil and this awareness of these deep connections. So it's all being spelled out in a multitude of alternative voices, but voices that apparently until now, at the top of our national governments, there is still a deaf ear. You know, there are very few national governments, maybe a few women now in Scandinavia, maybe New Zealand. There's perhaps a beginning of awareness trickling upwards. But, you know, this is, to me now, what we're talking about is really what's in our mind. What is our, how well do we know these two very, very diverse paths in this fork in the road? How well do we understand it? How clearly can we speak in defense of what we know we want and what most people know they want, what they long for?
So, you know, one fork is really a continuity of colonization, a continuity of fossil fuel industrialism, continuity of the last 30 years of globalization. It's that line continuing with its conquest, its violence, its monoculture. I call it the mechanistic mind, because that has been my work, you know, because I did my PhD in foundations of quantum theory. I've always rejected this mechanical way of thinking as an inadequate way of living in this world and thinking about the world. And on the other side are all of the amazing indigenous cultures that knew how to live without destroying the earth. They knew they were part of the earth. We now have a resurgence of the ability to transcend this mechanistic imposition, which was a fascism of the mind. It was a fascism. It tried to make Ayurveda illegal. It tried to make our cold pressed virgin oil mills illegal. It's trying to make human beings illegal. They're writing now about, you know, part of the whole agenda of social distancing and lockdown is to make all life look scary and humans look like the new scary thing, you know?
And there is
yeah,
major propaganda
yeah,
for robots being more intelligent, more kind, more wise. And of course now they're going to be much safer because they're not going to be carrying viruses. Extremely dangerous. And I would actually love, I mean, what I really want to be sure, Vandana, is that we also go on to the positive vision, and, you know, so that we try to clearly show this very destructive path, but that we also empower people with this sense that there is another way, that it is happening, and that we can strengthen it and join it. But as we're talking about this, I was dying to talk to you about Yuval Harari, because I see Yuval Harari is extremely dangerous. And I don't know how many people you're talking to or have seen how popular his books
Well, he's
been.
being brought to every TV station. Indian intellectuals have disappeared from Indian TV. It's only these globalized. Today, it's Jeffrey Sachs, you know, who said that women in the slave factories of Bangladesh had escaped from agriculture. And it was the first ladder of development in his book, End of Poverty, and I critiqued it. But Yuval Harari, you know, when I've always been given his books as the most intelligent man of today. His first book on Sapiens, it was so wrong in terms of evolution. He needs to read Dark Emu. He talks about agriculture as not being able to feed people till industrial agriculture came, when it is in fact industrial agriculture that created structural permanent hunger. So he's wrong on the evolution of humanity. He's also wrong. I mean, he does talk surveillance. On that, he talks a little bit. He's willing to talk about that. But he, on health, on agriculture, on anything to do with life, with biology, he constantly switches on the side of mastery, control, and annihilation of the living. And I can see that happen each time. There's this little subtle shift. And I can see the fork in the road that you talk about. It's now a fork between, will you take your instructions from Mother Earth? Or will you take instructions from big money and their tools and their technologies? Where will your instructions come from?
And he's actually talking about that now as transcending humanism, where we followed our feelings. And now he's saying, thanks to the marriage between infotech and genetic engineering, the marriage between infotech and genetic engineering now means that we have a way of understanding far more a way of understanding far better what our choices are. And he's talking with excitement about leaving. He almost talks it about as a sort of cesspool of, ever since life on Earth started, there's been this cesspool of natural competition. Now we have an opportunity to move into intelligent, essentially an intelligent, conscious evolution. As it's so dangerous, and it's so, unfortunately, can fit in with a type of new age thinking, which is all about that with our mind we create our own reality. And it also, he's talking about it with a certain excitement, and above all, making it sound inevitable. There's no questioning at all where these technologies came from, who funded them, who was behind them. It's some kind of inevitable, as so many Westerners do, some kind of inevitable evolutionary path. Now we've arrived there. We have to be a little bit careful and aware and decide who's going to be in control. But it's an inevitable step. This techno step is inevitable.
So the second thing from my quantum learning is there's nothing inevitable. There's nothing deterministic in the world. The world is uncertainty. Yeah. And anyone who tries to be a determinant is basically trying to say, you accept my power. You accept my propaganda. And sadly, many of our friends are falling into this trap because they carry with them a dualism of separation between humans and nature, between culture and nature, between biodiversity and cultural diversity. And I'll just give you two examples. So a lot of people, who think they are about happiness and well-being are actually falling into the Silicon Valley traps of transhumanism, as if we as human beings, conscious, living, don't have capacity to connect to life. That consciousness comes out of a machine, not out of our consciousness. And I think that error is so violative of who we are. But even dear George Monbiot, who is such a voice for the environment, wrote a column and then has given speeches again and again and again about how we can only save the planet by finishing off farmers and finishing off food. But then he doesn't understand that the gut microbiome is part of nature. And we've already been made very sick with 30 years of globalized, industrialized food systems. If the future will be these large mega farms, as Monsanto, Bayer, Bill Gates imagined, digital agriculture, they call it, where everything will be controlled by satellites and drones. They call it artificial intelligence. And Bayer stupidly made a comment the other day, which I replied to, saying, now we have the ability to tell a plant when to tell the farmer that they need water. I said, no, the plants know when they need water and they know how to take it. And the farmer knows their plants and they know exactly what to do to nourish the soil to hold water and not necessarily always irrigate. We've seen the damages of irrigation where it becomes intensive for chemical farming. So unfortunately, George Monbiot is talking that same language of escape from nature. We are not part of nature in a food cycle. All my writings in the last 10 years have been, whether it's my book, Who Really Feeds the World, or my book on food and health, it's all about how we are part of nature and food is the connector. And we can make this system through localization, through biodiversity, through ecology, part of the healing of the earth and healing of our bodies and healing of our communities. Or we can make the next escape through fake food, lab food, cellular genetic engineering. How can someone who claims to be an environmentalist accept genetic engineering as the foundation of food? I do not understand it.
No.
How can they accept GMO soya as the basis of the carbohydrates and proteins that will make an impossible burger that looks like meat and tastes like meat but is not meat? You know, in my philosophy, there's nothing higher than truth. And truth is lived. Truth is not derived. Truth is lived. It's your interconnections. And that's what all local cultures know. Yeah. They know their truth. And through living their truth, they know this is false and this is true. This is healthy and this is unhealthy. This is good food and this is bad food. So eroding our sense of discernment and discrimination between truth and falsehood is where the hyper-globalizers, through their digital systems, want to take us. They want to make us forget we are part of the earth. They want to make us forget we are human, with body, with hands that can touch and heal. It's not an accident that they didn't call physical distancing, but called it social distancing, because they were constructing a world of permanent social distancing. That is the world they'd like to have. Bill Gates is talking about, why do we need schools? Kids should work remotely. As if our best friends aren't the childhood friends we made in school. As if our best memories aren't going to school. You know, that the nurturance of a child is more than just learning how to read and write. So we are at a threshold, we are at a fork, and the fork says, you're part of the earth, you're part of your community, you're part of your humanity. The other fork said, no, you're not part of the earth, and you're not human, and you're just our latest object for manipulation. And this is our ultimate moment to say, no, your imperialism of death is unacceptable to us.
And I would also say that you are one of the best people in the world to talk about the fact that part of that lived experience was a type of science. People who lived and developed and grew in particular places tested and tried the herbs, the species. They knew the soils, the climate. There was a science of trying out hypotheses that went on for generations. And that has been completely dismissed as traditional superstition. And what has replaced it in the name of science has been a shoddy, profit-driven experimentation without any responsibility in terms of genuinely testing and trying new products, be they pesticides, be they genetically manufactured organisms, testing and trying their interaction with the rest of life. See, the traditional farmers, the traditional indigenous people were actually practicing and testing in ways that we must understand are more scientific than what's happening today. I'd love to hear you talk about that.
So, when I did my studies on the Green Revolution, why did I get into agriculture? Because I watched the state of Punjab, where I had done my MSc honors in physics, erupt in violence. I watched Bhopal destroyed with a pesticide gas leak. And I said, why is agriculture becoming so violent? Why is it looking like war? And then I studied the Green Revolution and realized it had come out of Hitler's labs. I also started to study other things, including I found an old copy of Howard's book in the Agriculture Ministry, The Agriculture Testament. And Howard's acknowledges, he was sent to India in 1905 to improve Indian agriculture, because that's part of the colonial mentality, that the cultures that aren't good enough, they have to be improved. The plants that have to be improved. Our minds have to be improved. And Howard writes that I found the soils were fertile. There were no pests damaging the crops. There were lots of insects. And I had more ways to improve British agriculture than to improve Indian agriculture. So I decided to make the Indian peasant my professor. And Agriculture Testament became the Bible of modern organic farming. So here was one science that said, diversity is the way, circular economies are the way, and he learned from indigenous cultures. He was a good enough scientist to know where his training was inadequate. The propaganda scientists haven't given up the habit of chemicals to feed the world. Well, the Green Revolution has failed, and Bill Gates is now taking it to Africa under the name of Agra, called the Alliance for the Green Revolution in Agra. And I always say, Mr. Gates, this Agra will not have a Taj Mahal. It'll just have ruins, like Punjab had ruins. The GMO experiment has failed, totally. It's failed to control pests, it's failed to control weeds. We have super pests, super weeds, and indebted farmers. And cases against Monsanto and Bayer on cancer because of glyphosate and Roundup. So I have been learning from our peasants, and over the years, I was asked last year, I was giving a talk with the agriculture minister on organic farming. And at the end of it, this publisher comes to us and says, I didn't know there was science in organic. I thought it was about trade and selling a commodity. So he asked me to do the book. And this book, I've done 35 years of my learning. It's Biodiversity, Agroecology, Regenerative Organic Agriculture, which is the confluence of all the ancient knowledge we had about organic farming as biodiverse farming and circular farming, and all the new sciences that are teaching us how the soil organisms work, teaching us how the cycles of nutrition work, how the rupture of the planetary boundaries is largely because of the chemicals in farming and the rupture and the monocultures in farming. I'm trying to see if I can show you. Here it is. This, Helena, is what anyone concerned with climate change should be looking at. It's the violation of the planetary boundaries. The highest is the species disappearance. But the second is nitrogen, that war chemical that became synthetic fertilizer. And all these synthetic companies, are working together to create these solutions. And they have this cook-up of a yield gap, or the poor, pathetic third world countries. But the yield is the wrong word, because we don't grow a monoculture. And if you measure the yield of one crop, it's not good enough. You have to measure the output of the whole system. And we produce more, and talking positively over these 30 years, saving seeds, learning from our nature, learning from farmers, we can grow enough food to feed all of India twice over by conserving biodiversity, regenerating the soil, regenerating the water, and healing the broken climate cycle. Inorganic farming is the solution to climate change. But a lot of our friends in the climate debate do not want to look at life. Yeah. And I think the Western disease is the fear of life and freedom. That's the disease. That's the virus, And all local cultures, all indigenous cultures have celebrated life and celebrated the freedom of every species, every child. In no indigenous culture do they force children to say, learn to do this, become an engineer, become a doctor, become a laptop operator. They never force. Forcing comes out of violence. Violence comes out of colonizing. And freedom.
I think another way to put it, in the modern industrial era, we're factory farming our children. The beginnings of the modern education was to create obedient servants to big industry, to already the big wealthy traders. But, it would be so great, Vandana, before you have to go.
Can I say just one thing before on that one?
Yeah.
So Bill Gates' proposal to New York for making smart education and reimagining education is, don't let the kids go to school. It's real estate, prime real estate, just grab it and let them learn remote learning. But because they will have a tendency to not concentrate, put spyware on them to monitor, are they paying attention? So not only are we creating factory children, we are now creating a surveillance state for our children from when they're little. And this is unacceptable to me. I think we need a revolt worldwide. So for me, the continuation of our revolt at Seattle, where in IFG we said WTO and free trade is taking away our freedom, our world is not for sale. I think we now need to say our cultures, our children, our earth is not just not for sale, but it's not here to be controlled by you. Get off our bodies, get off our minds. all living systems grow outwards from the small. A little fetus gave birth to you, Helena, and it gave birth to me. You didn't come ready-made as Helena. I didn't come ready-made as Vandana. Two cells merged. And out of it grew what we have become, partly shaped by our parents, our cultures, by our consciousness, our choices, our relationships. Localization recognizes that living systems grow from the small. And the fact that they grow from the small doesn't mean they are stuck, because small networks, I think the best lesson is our gut microbiome. For everyone who says, oh, but how can communities coordinate? I said, here are 60 trillion microbes in your gut coordinating brilliantly to keep you alive and give you health. If they can get it right, surely we as human beings can learn from the microbes. They are not our enemies. As Bill Gates keeps saying, the next enemy warfare is against the microbe. Not missiles, but microbes. No, microbes is life. Yeah. There'd be no life without microbes, Mr. Bill Gates. Yeah. It's your ignorance that is allowing this violence to spread. And I don't think we can remove your ignorance, but we can allow the flourishing of our intelligences and our knowledges. And localization is where that flourishing begins.
You take any 2 bits of land, 1 square meter, 1,000 square hectares, and you plant diversity on 1 bit of land, monoculture on the other. You will always be able to get more from the diversified bit of land. Always. You can get vastly more. But of course, in order to do that in an intelligent way, it requires more human eyes and hands and care per acre. We can't afford the stupid machines that pick all the apples before they're ripe and only a third are ripe, and then half of them will get burned somewhere in this supposedly efficient industrial system. So it is vital that we do away with this fundamental assumption behind the dominant economy about so-called efficiencies of scale, to realize that in all natural systems, in farming, fishery, and in forestry, diversification is essential, and that monocultures are less efficient. In other words, I'm even saying now, when it comes to natural systems and primary production, the efficiency of scale is almost the smaller, the better. And as you get bigger and bigger, and as you get monocultural, we are wasting water, we are wasting soil, and we couldn't be more inefficient. So it'd be so good if you could talk about the productivity of small-scale diversified agriculture.
So when systems are biodiverse and small-scale, they produce more nutrition. So in Navdanya, we don't measure yield, which is an empty concept, because it doesn't measure how you left the land. It doesn't tell you how the farmer has fared. It doesn't tell you what is in the food. Is it nutritionally empty, toxic commodity, or is it nourishing food? It doesn't tell you anything except commodity trade. It's a unit of commerce. It's not a unit of life. So we said, let's measure nutrition per acre and health per acre. And that's where we got the figures of we could feed 2 times India. But on every nutrient, on the biodiverse organic system, it's so much more than the chemical. But even the FAO has recognized that the smaller the farm, the more it produces. This is FAO data, they know it. So the smaller the farm, the more it produces, because living systems require care. And the smaller the scale, the more care you can give. And so we evolved health instead of just yield per acre, which is a misnomer. We evolved health per acre, and then we did wealth per acre. We said, okay, let's look at the economics. In India alone, just for environmental and social damage, it's $1.3 trillion annually. And we use government data and UN tables to make the conversion. If you add health disasters, the chronic diseases, it is another 1.5 trillion. So about 3 trillion is the harm. Just the corona epidemic, every day we are losing 4.5 billion. dollars. This is a shadow of the globalized economy. So my next piece of work for Navdanya is we are going to, because we are working with communities and as they've realized that, localization is the way to go. And because so many of the workers have been thrown out of the city, I think this new globalization is creating throwaway people. Yeah. And we are saying there's no throwaway person. So we are working on plans at the village level on how can you reabsorb more hands. Get rid of the Roundup, get rid of the combined harvester, just get rid of the fossil fuels and the chemicals and put your hands at work to regenerate the earth. So care per acre will be the efficiency. And because of all my years and years of work on this, 1 unit of input can produce 10 units of food in an ecological, local, biodiverse system. 10 units of input were used to produce 1 unit of food in the industrial system. And in the fake food system of intensive surveillance, drone, chemical-driven systems, and then the heavy modulation in factories with heavy energy use, you're going to probably have 1,000 to 1. And I've asked this question to these people who promote fake food as protecting the land. I said, all that additional energy you're going to put to use will either come directly from fossil fuels or by shadows of fossil fuels in your so-called renewable energy. Yeah. As we know in the peak energy discussion of the International Forum on Globalization, it takes more fossil fuels to produce biofuels than you substitute. And if you add the footprint of all the metals mined and all the lithiums mined, no, electric cars are not going to save this planet. Yeah, so it will have to be, we have to know in our minds we are part of the earth. We have to live our lives as part of the cycles of the earth. And that means care. And care can only be given at the small scale. And all my research has shown that centuries ago, we were 2 acres per family. We are still 2 acres per family. But the smaller the farm, our research on our Navdanya farm, and we have this Earth University where we teach courses, and I hope after this lockdown, people will be able to come. We decided this thing of, small farms must go because we must have efficiency of scale and there's hunger and people have to be fed. Okay, let's take 1 acre and grow everything we can on it. We can not just feed a family of 6, but they can have enough surplus to sell to pay for education, health, everything. So an acre is enough to grow with care, and 1 million acres aren't enough to grow carelessness.
And tell us what you think about the Green New Deal. And are there sort of several different ideas about the Green New Deal? What can we say about these industrial renewable energy systems and perhaps a more small-scale decentralized path?
So I think there are many Green New Deals.
Yeah.
And, Roosevelt was very clear. The New Deal is regenerate the earth and regenerate livelihoods and put them together. That's all it was. He didn't talk about how to create a new opportunity for the robber barons. But sadly, in one stream of the Green New Deal, there is a lot of how can people make money out of this. BlackRock is playing a big role, saying how can we financialize the carbon in the soil and create a whole new carbon slavery. And we've had friends, again, close friends say, well, if the farmers aren't earning enough, let them earn enough by selling their carbon. But the companies that brought your food down to value 0, you think if today they pay you a high value of carbon, they will not drop that to 0? And that's not the way to regenerate carbon. The way to regenerate carbon is because you must give back to the earth. And I differentiate between living carbon and dead carbon. And I totally disagree with Bill Gates and all our friends in the regeneration and the renewable energy who talk decarbonization. Yeah. If we decarbonize the world, we'd be dead. Life is carbon. But living carbon regenerates life. Dead carbon was fossilized. We should never have tapped it. It gave us Standard Oil. It gave us the robber barons. But it would be wrong to say that kind of greed and that kind of consumption should be maintained now by another source. We'll have to power down, as Richard Heinemann constantly points out. And we have to stop being consumers. It was the wrong place to be. We have to be citizens, stop being consumers. And therefore, I think what's needed is not a deal anymore. I think what's needed is a new relationship with the earth based on forgiveness. Please, we apologize. And based on gratitude, thank you for all you give. That's how the Aboriginal people live. That's how the Amazon Indians live. That is what we have to learn. I really think it's time for the colonizing West to learn from indigenous people. A lot of problems will be solved.
And what would you say to people, including in India, who feel, well, we don't want to go all the way back to live exactly as indigenous people do? What would you say to them?
Well, this lockdown has thrown half of India back to their villages. And they are all saying, we don't trust this economy that could throw us out like this. They asked, and when it's all removed, will you come back? We said, we'll never come back. We were tempted by money. We will never forget our families, our villages. And I've just done a letter from Mother Earth for our communities to say, share this letter, that the Mother Earth is inviting you. She never said, you are a nobody, I'll throw you out. For her, everyone has a place. So we are definitely at a watershed, and return to earth is the way to go, not further away from her. And anyone who thinks escaping from her is a constraint, that was the liberal idea, that escaping from the earth was liberation. It was an illusion. Yeah. Being part of the earth is the liberation.
Exactly. And it is also, I think more and more people also in the Western industrialized world, as they now all across the world have started gardening and planting things from seed and connecting more, even during lockdown, they've actually been connecting more with others and developing mutual aid groups to support the poor, to support the aged. So there's now a real appetite for life, for connection, for community, to the earth and to others. So it's thrilling to hear you say that there is a very large contingent of people in India who are saying, we don't want to go back to these cities that are actually the opposite of liberation. They are a type of prison, a prison where you're caught in this life or death struggle. Every single thing you need money. And where does that money come from? Who controls that flow of money? What control do you have over that? And
so the Green New Deal, which begins with money, will be a bad deal. A Green New Deal that says, let's shift to life, might have something to offer.
And that, can you say about that also in connection with more localized, diversified systems and communities?
So, I wrote after the Seattle protests and after we shut down WTO, and we were always accused, they say, oh, the anti-globalizers know what they're against, but they don't know what we're for. And I said, no, we know what we're for. We're saying our life is not for sale. We love life. We love our freedom. So I wrote my book, Earth Democracy, while practicing this new living democracy with our communities. For anyone who thinks that a new world will be born top down, they don't get it. Life grows from the bottom up, and localization is where the new world will be created.
Wonderful, wonderful.
My loving greetings from my hometown and my birthplace in Dehradun, India, where I built the Earth University and the Biodiversity Farm. Localization is the way we'll grow, and my best wishes for World Localization Day.
Thank you so much, Vandana. Thank you. And thank you so much for your work. I would have loved to have asked you also about UBI. Do you want to say something quickly about UBI?
Oh, I can.
Universal Basic Income.
Sure.
Because again, where is that coming from?
Sure. Okay, sure. Yeah. So we are part of a universe. We are all living beings. And anything we do must first say everyone has a right to food, everyone has a right to water, everyone has a right to be able to work. The minute you begin with a universal basic income, you're already saying money comes first. And two, you're not explaining where the money will come from. If governments are bankrupt, will they pay? Will it be in rupees in India or US dollars? How can you have a universal basic income when the currencies are themselves so unstable? But worst, we are at this threshold where first our cash was made illegal and digital currency was forced. And now all of these people want to make money out of cryptocurrency. They will assign what value you are. So the universal will be decided by the billionaires. And again, Yuval Harari has said, when 99% of the people won't be useful in the, he uses the word useless people. He uses that word repeatedly. And I disagree with it. No one's useless. No species is useless. And he says, and of course, 99% useless people will be very troublesome. So a universal basic income must be given so they all can have a smartphone and download games to keep busy. That is his vision. So a universal basic income, no one has shown me where will the money come, what will it be, how much will it be. It's a slogan to basically prevent people from rising and saying, we will be local, we will work with the earth, we will meet our needs.
And I think it is also, you know, it's sort of, what I'm saying is that if we don't change the system and we allow a few crumbs to fall to the bottom to prevent revolt, we're heading towards this suicidal path. So we have no choice. We've got to change the system. We've got to transform the system. And anything we can do right now to build the lifeboats at the local level, where we actually say that heirloom seeds and local food needs to be a universal, basic human right. That's what, you know, what we're both in total agreement about. Much, much love to you. Much love.
Bye. Take care.